Day 4 of Sacramento Kings training camp, and the bumps and bruises are really starting to show. I take you back inside the Kings practice facility where I learned of a new staple of the Kings offense. I'll explain right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And typically, these are the dog days of training camp that we're getting into. Now, an NBA training camp is significantly shorter than an NFL training camp in terms of it's pretty much like one hell week, quote unquote, 1 week, maybe a week and a half of like hardcore getting to work, getting in the gym, working together, reviewing, getting in shape, right? And then the preseason begins. And once we get into preseason time, I guess technically you could say training camp is still going on, but now you're talking about preseason practices and you start to build your practice schedules around your games and your playing time. And it's more of a semblance of what the regular season is going to be. So training camp is a unique week to week and a half period where it's just nonstop practice, right? And especially for someone like Mike Brown, who emphasizes and needs and uses as much practice time as he does, especially with the two-a-days that the Kings have had this week. It really is a hell week here in Sacramento. We're starting to see the signs of wear and tear a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that guys are injured or anything like that, other than the injuries that we all already know about to Kevin Huerter and Devin Carter and Jordan McLaughlin and Trey Lyles, right? No new injuries or anything like that, but you're seeing the signs, you're seeing the wear and tear a little bit of these players from not just getting back into shape, but how physical this training camp has been. Physicality has been a real emphasis of this Kings team, not just this year, but over the last couple of years. Their physicality defensively is what helped them turn their defense around from one of the worst in the league to around middle of the pack last season. So you best believe the Kings are going to continue to emphasize that physicality. That's been a major focus in training camp on both sides of the ball. And I walked in, right, and I have my camera, and once it was another one of those days where we didn't get to see a lot. When we walked in, the Kings were doing their individual free throw drills. And on the far side of the gym from where we walk in, the opposite corner of the gym, I see Domantas Sabonis taking free throws. And I could not miss a wide, noticeable gash or scratch, very red, right on the right arm of Domantas Sabonis. Now, this was not a wound or anything gruesome or anything to be overly concerned about. We know Domantas Sabonis is a physical player. The joke is Domantas Sabonis gets hit in the face every single time that he plays basketball. I imagine he's probably gotten hit in the face a time or two during training camp, but Sabonis is not afraid of physicality. He quite often creates that physicality himself. So it's no surprise at all to see him get a little scratched up and get a little scraped up. And you see guys starting to move a little more gingerly, right? Guys have a little less pep in their step than the energy they brought into day 1 and day 2 of training camp. But this is to be expected. If the Sacramento Kings want to be a physical basketball team that outmuscles their opponents, that comes in and sets the tone defensively and physically, they have to be willing to do that to themselves, and that has to start right away. That can't start October 24th versus the Minnesota Timberwolves or next Wednesday versus the Golden State Warriors. It has to start now. The Kings are setting that standard now, and if the most physical competition they're going to face is themselves in training camp and in practice, that bodes well for the whole season, right? It's like when a baseball player is in the on-deck circle, right, and they put an extra weight on their bat. So by the time that they actually step up into the plate and take that weight off, the bat feels lighter, right? It's kind of the same principle. The Kings are so physical and have such a physical emphasis in training camp that hopefully they will be the ones setting the tone physicality-wise, and the competition that they're facing won't be as physical as the way they've been playing during training camp. And believe me when I say Mike Brown and the coaching staff and the training staff, they're doing a good job taking care of these players. So I'm not worried at all about the Kings potentially hurting themselves. The Kings aren't doing any more to heighten injury risk or anything like that by emphasizing this physicality. Mike Brown shared a little bit of his schedule with us for the next week. Tomorrow, the Kings will transition from more walkthrough and drill heavy stuff. They'll transition into scrimmages and actual 5-on-5 and getting into game shape. That's going to be a real focus and a real emphasis for this team, is getting into game shape, running up and down and playing in that way. So that was something that Mike Brown really emphasized at practice today, that getting into game shape. Scrimmages tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see some of those scrimmages when the media is let in during training camp. And then Sunday, the team will have off. So Mike's given this team a rest, giving them a break. They've been on since Tuesday, technically, is when training camp started. But Monday, they had media day. The day before that, they were having team meetings and things like that. So it's really been basically a week that these guys have been on. So Mike will give them Sunday off. And then come Monday and next week, the Kings will start to transition into their preparation and practices in the build-up for Wednesday's home game against the Golden State Warriors, which will be kind of similar to how the Kings will handle preparation for a game and a couple days off during the regular season. We learned today a new staple of Mike Brown's Kings offense. Technically, I guess you could also call it Jay Triano's offense. Jay Triano is one of the lead assistant coaches here in Sacramento. He is essentially, if this were like football standards, he's the offensive coordinator. And Luke Lautz replaced Jordi Fernandez as essentially the defensive coordinator. So Jay is in charge of the offense. Luke is in charge of the defense. They're all overseen by Kings head coach Mike Brown that ultimately makes the final decisions. You're going to hear from Mike. I have a bunch of clips for you from Mike Brown and a couple clips for you from Jalen McDaniels coming up later on in this podcast. But we learned a new pillar of Sacramento's offense, something different than the past 2 years. And that's crashing the offensive glass. There's going to be a new emphasis for the Sacramento Kings this year on intentionally trying to create more possessions for the Kings. And we're not just talking about Domantas Sabonis and Trey Lyles and the bigs, Alex Len. It's not just going to be their job to try and stick in the paint and create more opportunities. The Kings, if they can help it, want 4 or 5 guys trying to crash the offensive glass. The theory is when you create more possessions and create more opportunities, ultimately you create more points. But if you're taking that a step further, if you're creating more possessions for yourself and getting second and third chance opportunities, that means that you don't have to be as effective on each possession, right? You can get away with having a possession or two where you don't get a bucket or don't get a point at the end of it because you're buying yourself more possessions. That ultimately leads to higher score, ultimately leads to more possessions for yourself and taking the ball out of your opponent's hands more. And the opponent can't score and can't beat you if they don't have the ball in their hands. Now, one of the risks to crashing the glass offensively is potentially leaving yourself open for transition defensive issues, right? A team could get the rebound and somebody leaks out and gets up court and it's an easy layup or an easy dunk or an easy three-pointer. From what I understand, the idea is that by crashing the glass, you're going to have to force your opponent to box out. And if you think about like a box out, right? So imagine you are the defensive team that's trying to secure the defensive rebound. I'm on offense, right? Let's say I took a 3 and I'm trying to follow my shot in case it comes off the rim. Well, you have to get between me and the basket that you're defending. So if you're doing that, and let's say you or one of your teammates gets the rebound. Now, if you're trying to break back the other end of the floor in transition, I'm already ahead of you because you've boxed me out. You put yourself between me and the basket I'm trying to score on, but I'm directly in between you and the basket you need to now score on. So I'm ahead of you if it's a foot race, right? So the Kings believe that by crashing the glass, they're going to force teams to box them out and stay behind them, therefore limiting their transition opportunities. And if someone does leak out or someone tries to early break, the Kings could have a one-man advantage in trying to crash the offensive glass. Now, it's going to be a gamble in some sense, and I look forward to seeing it more in action and seeing what it looks like to see if De'Aaron is trying to attack more for the offensive rebounds and DeRozan is trying to do it. I'm very interested to see what this looks like, but in theory, it makes sense, and it's a new pillar of Sacramento's offense. And that was one of the things that Mike Brown mentioned. You're going to hear in a second talking about what defensive-minded guys like Jalen McDaniels, guys like Terry Taylor, right? These defensive-minded guys who can come in and do all the dirty work defensively. Offensively, they need to do things to keep themselves on the floor, right? There's no use in having a guy that really helps you defensively if you're playing 4-on-5 on offense and an opposing defense doesn't respect them. So Mike is going to share a little bit later on some of the things that defensive-minded players can do offensively outside of just scoring the basketball and hitting threes to keep themselves on the floor. And you're also going to hear from Mike Brown talking about the multi-way battle for the final 1 or 2 roster spots. He mentions a lot of names and why they have been impressing him so far. So you're going to hear a lot from Mike Brown here in just a little bit, as well as Jalen McDaniels. I'm looking forward to sharing all of that for you. Before that, though, I want to let you know that today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the site that you need to go to get your tickets, whether it's Kings tickets, 49ers tickets, major sporting events, smaller sporting events, major concerts, theatrical productions, comedy shows. Gametime has the tickets for them all. And the best part about Gametime is the closer you get to the event, the better those prices are. You can save a ton of money by buying last minute. Normally, procrastination's not a great thing, but Gametime actually rewards you for waiting until the event is closer, or understands that, life sometimes gets in the way and maybe you want to go, but you're not sure if you can. And then suddenly your schedule frees up. And now, hey, all of a sudden I can go to the Kings game tonight. Let me get my tickets. Oh, they're cheaper than had I bought them a week or two in advance. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier, filtering out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats. They have all amazing features like their all-in pricing feature that shows you what you're going to pay up front. Their seat views are great. The lowest price guarantee. Their ticketing coverage is better than you'll find anywhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, let's hear a little bit from Mike Brown today. In speaking about the physicality and the bumps and bruises, Mike gave credit to his players and his coaches for how they've approached and handled the hard asking price and expectations of this physical training camp.
Everybody's doing pretty good. You're 100% correct. Guys are starting to feel the bumps and the bruises from the practices that we've had. But I give our guys credit, man. They've been locked in. They're trying to pay attention to the details and trying to be present all the time. They're playing extremely hard. You feel they're connected and they're starting to get it. And I also give my coaching staff a lot of credit. They've done a fantastic job, not only throughout the course of summertime, but through the early stages of training camp. My staff has been really, really good. They've been on top of it, and I think they're only going to get better, just like the players are.
Now, this next clip I know is going to excite a lot of Sacramento Kings fans. Mike Brown started sharing with us some details of what the two-man game, the dribble handoff game between Domantas Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan is going to look like. Good luck, defenses. That's all I'm going to say.
I tell you what, it can be off the charts, and mainly because of DeMar's ability to pass the basketball. I said this before. You think that, okay, hey, he's a guy that's going to ISO on that long post area, or he's going to ISO right off the elbow. But, man, he can bring it in transition. He can play the pick and roll game. And now the DHO game is a different element to where he may not be easily blitzed if he hasn't gone. And so once he gets that ball, if you go under and Domas does the DHO low enough, it's a wrap. If you chase him over and he gets to a sweet spot, it's a wrap in terms of scoring. But his added ability of playmaking, whether it's hitting Domas in the pocket or because of who he is, the gravity of him touching the paint and drawing somebody else, his ability to spray the basketball, it can be really good for us.
And that tree of Domantas Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan, their two-man game, has so many branches off of it, right? Mike Brown laid out a lot of them there. But the whole point is we're talking about two guys, and the defense will be focused on reacting to those two guys so much and playing them properly that there's three other guys on the floor, one of them being named De'Aaron Fox, that are going to be able to react and play off of those two in that two-man game. That's why I'm telling you, these guys are going to get more open looks and good looks than they've ever gotten before. And some of them are going to be getting looks that they should never, ever get, period, for how good they are. That's just how, it's like a Swiss Army knife offensively. There's so many points of attack with this group, and that DeMar and Domantas Sabonis DHO game is going to be really, really fun to watch. I can't wait to see that in action. Hopefully we get a look at it against the Warriors on Wednesday. I mentioned the new staple of Sacramento's offense. That's one of the things that Mike laid out for how some of these defensive-minded players, guys that work hard on the defensive end, do all the dirty work on the defensive end, how they can contribute offensively to be able to stay on the floor.
One of our staples is attacking the offensive glass. And so not only if they go every single time when they're in the right position, but if they go and get a hand on it, that's something that can really, really stand out. And Trey was big for us last year. I think he was by far Keegan was too, but Trey, in terms of subs, he was probably our best crash guy. And on top of him crashing, he got his hand on the basketball, so that's huge. Running the floor, we have the fastest guy in the game in Fox. We have probably the best passing big man arguably in the game, or at least one of two or maybe three in Domas. And so these guys are going to get you the ball, and we're emphasizing the throw-ahead pass or the kick-ahead pass from the back court to the front court. So get to the corners. Do your darndest to get to the corners, flatten the defense out, create that space so a guy like Fox can attack before the defense is set, and now you're going to get a catch-and-shoot horse shot because he's going to get off of it. So crashing the glass, running the floor, cutting the score, everything you do, it's emphasized with a hard movement in order to score, or when you touch that paint, to create a tag from the weak side so your teammates can get open. You do those things and you're going to have a chance to get on the floor, especially if you're defending at a high level.
And what I like about all that Mike lays out there is that you don't need to be an incredibly skilled player. You don't need to be an amazing shooter. You don't need to have the talent of Fox or Sabonis or DeRozan to do any of that stuff. The foundation of everything that Mike Brown is talking about there is effort and the willingness to put in the extra effort to get to the corner, to cut hard, to crash the offensive glass, to get up and down the floor quickly. And if these guys are already known for the amount of effort that they put in on the defensive end with how hard they work and doing all that dirty work defensively, it makes sense. Like, hey, this is a clear way by giving us the same thing on one side of the floor that you're already giving us on the other side. This is how you can make the team. And Mike Brown is one of the best coaches in the league when it comes to players knowing that if they play this way and give that effort, they're going to get opportunity. Keon Ellis got his initial opportunity last season when the Kings were getting their butts kicked by the Houston Rockets. Keon Ellis gets in after the game is well over. The Kings are down by 30 plus at this point. He comes in the second half. He plays hard, draws Mike's attention. That gets him an opportunity in the starting lineup when De'Aaron Fox goes down. The rest is history, and now Keon Ellis is competing for a starting spot and went from two-way contract to main NBA contract and will have a part or be playing a part in Sacramento's rotation. Right, so Mike will reward guys for playing that way. And that is probably very exciting to a guy like Jalen McDaniels or Terry Taylor or some of these just defensive workhorse guys that are ready to come in and make an extra effort. And some of these guys are battling for the final roster spots. And Mike lays out how good this battle is and how many guys are drawing his and the coach's attentions.
I tell you what, Monty and, and Wes, they've done a great job of getting guys in training camp that have a great feel for the game, that are good guys, they're going to play hard, and that, where we don't have to spend a lot of extra time with their attitude or even trying to teach them, because they're in here all the time and or they pick it up very easily. So, a lot of guys are making their presence shown. I thought Isaiah did a great job, and he's on a two-way deal, but he did a great job today hitting the glass. Isaac did a great job hitting the glass, and not only that, both those guys, they knocked down a couple of catch-and-shoot threes, and then they were great defensively. Terry is, man, he's about as tough as they come, and his physical presence on the floor, whether it's offense or rebounding and or defending, is second to none for a young guy. Broderick's a guy that's picked up the stuff really easily. Scal has shown that he's a worthy vet in being here. So I'm not trying to be quote unquote political about it, but every guy we've talked as a staff, we've almost talked about every guy at different times after practices that just kind of made us raise our eyebrows and go, okay, he's adding to camp. Now at the end of the day, will he make the team, or will he be in the G League, or will that happen? This or that happen? I don't know, but you feel good about the guys that we have in camp right now and the progress, not only that they're making, but how they're helping push all of the guys in front of them.
I still have one more clip for you from Mike Brown talking specifically about Devin Carter. Plus, you're going to hear a little bit from Jalen McDaniels still to come here on Locked On Kings. Before that, though, I want to tell you more about our title sponsor here of the Locked On Kings podcast. I'm talking about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can get this season going with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Help kill the time before NBA season begins in 20 or so days. 20 days from today, the Kings will be playing their first game of the season. Cannot wait, but that still feels like forever. So FanDuel can help you kill the time. And when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Put $5 on anything, whatever it is. Win or lose, you're getting $200 in bonus bets right away for you to really start to play and make some money. Save those $200 to get you through this Sacramento Kings season and hopefully turn those $200 into multi-hundreds that then go in your pocket. That's FanDuel.com to start playing today. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. It's got to be tough for Devin Carter to be drafted into the league in your first NBA training camp. You're sitting there on the sidelines, not able to participate because only a couple months earlier you had shoulder surgery that's going to keep you out for a large period of time. And training camp is a really important time for rookies to really start to get the grasp of the differences at the NBA level, and especially for a guard, someone who's going to have the ball in their hands and understanding the foundation of how the Sacramento Kings are trying to play on both sides of the ball. It's tough to miss this if you're Devin Carter. It's also tough to deal with significant injuries, period, for any player, because sometimes it can feel like you're left out or you're left behind. The show must go on, and you kind of get pushed to the sideline a little bit. Well, Mike Brown explains how the Kings are and how important it is for the Kings to keep Devin Carter involved, keep him right there so he's learning everything as much as he possibly can without physically being on the floor.
It's extremely important because, in our business, when you're removed from the team, it can be a lonely feeling, and you can feel like people have forgotten about you. But, we our coaches found a little thing on him online where when he signed his rookie deal, they had cameras following him around, and he went to Mercedes-Benz dealership, and then he went to a jewelry store, and he look at all this bling bling, and he talking about a Maybach and all this, and oh my gosh, our veterans, especially DeMar, are like, you just got your first deal, rookie. Keep that money in your pocket, and so to be able to do stuff like that, to to get him or to make him feel engaged still is definitely a big thing, not just for him, but for all of our guys that are injured.
And we all look forward to seeing what Devin Carter looks like when he is available and able to go. All right, let's hear from Jalen McDaniels a little bit. Jalen is one of those guys where he's probably looking at this roster right now and his eyes are as wide as like dinner plates, because he should be looking at this roster and look at the depth at his position and go, there is none. Keegan Murray needs help. And if I'm Jalen, I feel like I'm the top guy right now to give him that help, regardless of how much he struggled last season, right? Whether you agree with the move, sending Davion Mitchell to Toronto and bringing back Jalen McDaniels or not, clearly the Kings saw something in him to make a move to go out and get him. So there's a real opportunity here for Jalen. He's one of those guys that fits that mold of what I'm talking about, who he's a dog on the defensive end. He works hard. He'll do all that dirty work. But the question is offensively, if he's shooting as horribly as he did last season or really struggling offensively to find his way, those things that Mike Brown laid out earlier, those are ways that he can stay on the floor. Well, he also has the tough task in training camp of having to guard the starters. He's having to try and guard De'Aaron Fox. He's having to try and guard DeMar DeRozan. And he walked us through how difficult that task is.
Guarding Fox, man, he just super quick. It's nothing like, you can't do nothing about it. You know, you got to make it hard. DeMar as well, can't jump on his pump fake, stuff like that. Sabonis, strong down there. You got to be tough down there with him. So, you know, I feel like me just playing against those type of players is getting me better as well and prepared for the season. So
I imagine there's one or two athletes, former athletes, listening to this podcast right now, and you were probably one of the best on your team or one of the best at your high school or whatever the case may be, right? Imagine in the case of like a Jalen McDaniels, right? You're one of the best defenders throughout your life, right? You've been able to lock down and handle defending many, many guys in your growth and build up to your NBA career. Then you walk in the door in training camp and you have to try and stay in front of De'Aaron Fox. Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine how difficult that must be for anybody, not just Jalen McDaniels. And Jalen also talks about DeMar's patented pump fake, right? DeMar DeRozan gets a lot of guys to jump and bite on his pump fake. It's one of the many reasons why DeMar goes to the line as much as he does. Well, Jalen talks about staying down and trying to handle that DeMar DeRozan crafty pump fake.
Talk about DeMar's pump fakes. Everyone says you can't go for them, but then everybody does.
Yeah, I know, right?
What's the key to not going for it?
Just knowing the personnel. You know, I know in the moment, scrimmaging, you know, you're not really thinking about it, but you got to always just lock in, just remember who you're guarding. Remember, I think he got a rook, like he was driving fast, and I'm like, oh, he about to pump fake. He pump fake, got the rook. I was like, see, yeah, he a rookie, don't know yet. So it's all good. Just got to know your personnel, I said.
We also got a side note yesterday. The Sacramento Kings picked up their fourth-year option on Keegan Murray. Nothing surprising, nothing really to talk about this, but I'll mention it here on the podcast, right? It's a no-brainer, right? Keegan Murray is phenomenal. He's clearly a part of what the Sacramento Kings are doing going forward. The Kings are already starting to have to worry about dealing with what they're going to pay him and extending him and getting him on his second contract. They have all his restricted rights and everything like that. So this is par for the course when you have a top rookie or have a top young player like the Kings do with Keegan Murray. So, but it's always cool to see. It's fun to see that we went through many, 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 many years of Kings first round picks not making it to a second deal or not getting their option picked up, right? So keeping that in mind, we don't want to take for granted guys like Keegan Murray and those press releases of, yes, the Kings are taking his second or picking up his option for the final year of his rookie deal. So that's good news. All right, tomorrow, like I mentioned, day 5 of training camp. It's a Saturday, scrimmage Saturday. They're going to be very scrimmage focused, very game focused tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get some good stuff from training camp for that. I actually will not be attending training camp myself, but my partner Kevin John from ABC 10 is planning on being there. So if anything big happens, I'll get the information from him. Still provide it for you here on the Locked On Kings podcast. So I'm looking forward to that. I appreciate your support as always. Thank you for all your questions and all your comments throughout this training camp week. It's been very, very exciting. And like I said earlier on, we're 20 days away from the start of the Sacramento Kings season. So close and yet so far, right? But we'll get you through those 20 days. We'll get ready for Kings and Timberwolves on the 24th, one step at a time. I appreciate you riding the wave with us throughout this long off season, now through training camp here on Locked On Kings. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.